If you haven't read it yet, you really need to check out this article, The Lost Generation. It's making waves everywhere. We even see JD Vance here boosting it. So it's a big deal. This is an article worth reading. It lays out how white men have been systematically oppressed and taken out of institutions of power over the last 10 years because of DEI and other factors. We all know this has happened, but to see it laid out in long form article content like this is shocking and strong propaganda. So I'm really glad for this article, but I was a little sad when I found out that the author was, in fact, Jewish. So even though he is, throughout this article, lamenting the racism on display against white men in Hollywood, in the news, in academia, in the arts, in law, in medicine, everywhere. And that's really true. And I'm very glad that that message is being put out there. It's just sad that it has to come from a Jewish man. Because as we know, Jews get to go back and forth between being white and not being white whenever they feel like it. I do believe that this Jewish man may have suffered some of the racism that is levied against white guys, especially in the modern DEI era, but he also gets to say he's not white whenever he wants to. And we see Jews doing this all the time. For example, in this case of the representative of Arkansas, I think, who talks about having guilt every day for being white, and she is pushing curriculum in the public schools to teach kids to feel guilty about being white. But she's Jewish. So we have two stories within about a week of a Jew being extremely pro-white and a Jew being extremely anti-white, and both people can claim that they are not white when they feel like it, which someone like me, who is not Jewish, doesn't get to do. I am just white. I don't have any other exotic ethnicity to claim. I'm just a white guy, right? So I really suffer from the anti-white male bigotry that we have experienced for the last 10 years. But I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the response we're seeing from the right to this article that laments the fact that the article was too weak, because the article really is written by a Jewish guy who's kind of liberal, but then suffered under DEI racism. And so from that perspective, it's actually a powerful piece of propaganda because you can share it far and wide with normies and they won't be offended because it comes from the perspective of someone who just wants liberalism to work, but there's all this anti-white male racism, right? And so there is a valid argument to say that that's too soft and he is too weak here at the end, because at the end of the article, Jacob Savage basically blames himself a little bit. Let me actually read that part. I think it's a very important part of the article. Let's get there. It's right at the very end. Where are we at? Here we go. He says, at the time I blamed those women, and these are the women who took his job. Of course I did. They've since ascended the TV ladder and work as co-executive producers on major shows. On some level, even today, I can't help think, that could have been me. That should have been me. Which is true, right? I'm not saying that those women were inherently worse than him, but if you've read the whole article, you see that there was in place an anti-white male bigotry that kept many white men from getting a job and gave those jobs to women and people of color. But those women didn't take our jobs any more than the 50-year-old Hollywood lifers had. The lifers were still there. They're still there. And I'm not angry at the women and people of color who made it instead of me. People have the right, in most cases, the responsibility to take the opportunities that are offered them, or even at the older white guys who ensured that I didn't. So this is where right-wingers have a problem with this article, and I agree with them. It is the women's fault for taking the job. It is the people of color's fault for taking the job. It's not their fault personally, individually. As he says, you take the opportunities that are offered to you, but they still took the jobs. They were white male jobs before, and now they're not. So there is some resentment that is due there. There was an injustice, And, it was these people who took advantage of it. And it was the older white guys who ensured that I didn't. These were the older white guys who hired those people. So these people are even more to blame because they enforced the injustice, right? So both of these people are to blame for conspiring against the white men. But he goes on, mostly I'm annoyed at myself. Because instead of settling down, proposing to my then girlfriend, now wife, and earning a steady income that might support a family, I spent a decade insisting the world treat me fairly, when the world was loudly telling me it had no intention of doing so. I could see what was happening. I was being told point blank what was happening, and still I thought I'd be the exception. That if I wrote one more script, took one more meeting, I'd slip through. But very few people get to be the exception. It's strange and more than a little poisonous to see yourself buffeted by forces beyond your control, but there's also a comfort in it, because it's less painful to scroll through other people's IMDb pages late at night figuring out what shortcut, race, gender, connections they took to success, than to grapple with the fact that there are white men my age who've succeeded and I am not one of them. I could have worked harder, I could have networked better, I could have been better. The truth is, I'm not some extraordinary talent who has passed over. I'm an ordinary talent, and in ordinary times, that would have been enough. There's a wounded pride here, but how could there not be? I have 2 sons. I used to imagine, long before they were born, that I would take them to film sets, that I'd bring them along to exotic locations. Instead, their father spends most of his working day in his bedroom scrolling through spreadsheets and ticket listings. What do I say when my boys ask about my old hopes and dreams? What do I tell them when they ask about theirs? So this is where a lot of people took issue with the article. They say it's too timid, it's too weak. Jeremy Carl here, who wrote a book on anti-white bigotry, says, I'll tell him what he should do. Be a freaking man. Stand up for himself. That's what he should do. This is what the right is saying here. And I do think he's wrong to not blame the people who were conspiring to set this whole thing up. I think we should blame those people. They were either cowardly or evil to, systematically rule out white men. That is an evil thing to do, especially when white men created those industries. But I have a problem as well with this whole be a freaking man, stand up for yourself thing. You can't do that, Jeremy Carl. If you're in Hollywood and you're trying to make it in 2017 as a white man, you can't do anything. That's the whole point of the article. If you're trying to get a job at a nice university in America, you won't get the job. You just won't get it. It's not going to you, and there's no amount of standing up for yourself that's going to change that. That's the problem. He's actually right about these forces being outside of his control. He is right to be demoralized. Because guess what happens when you go through a decade or 2 decades of demoralization, intentional demoralization? You get demoralized. That's what happens. You get demoralized because there is nothing to do. That's what learned helplessness is. It's learning that you are helpless. And this article pretty convincingly shows that as a white man trying to make it in art, in movies, in news, in universities, you are helpless. You are not going to make it. That's the truth. Now, yes, of course, as the author points out, there might be these genius level guys that are just so amazing that they're going to make it, right? But that's not most people. And so he's kind of right to say maybe I should have given up sooner. I think that's kind of a cope. That's kind of dumb. But so is this. So is this right-wing thing that's just saying be a freaking man. What are you going to do, man? You're going to recreate the Hollywood industry? You're just going to man hard enough to create your own movie studio, bro? That's the same thing he's saying about being like a genius level talent. Yeah, maybe some people are going to do that. Some people are going to start their own university or something. But that is not reasonable. That's not normal, right? That's not what people are going to do. So what do you want them to do? Like being a freaking man. Do what? Do what? Standing up for yourself. Just yell at the people who are not giving you a job? Okay, great. You'll feel good for your moment, but then you still don't have a job, right? You still don't have any of the cultural influence that job bestows. White men are still on the outs. That's the problem. The problem is that the door was shut, and standing up for yourself is not going to open that door. And it's still not opening that door. We are still there today. Even though JD Vance is boosting this article and they're fighting DEI, nobody's getting fired. All the women and people of color who got all those jobs for the last 10 years, they still have those jobs, unless they were just like so incompetent that they got fired because they like had some big scandal. But most of them still have those jobs, and they are not hiring white men. Maybe they're not talking about it like DEI like they were before, but they're not hiring those people. Maybe like slightly more, but most people are still not going to get hired if they're a white man. Most people will not get that job. Because those people, those women and people of color, are way more tribal. They're not going to give away power like the white men did 10 years ago. They're not going to. They're going to celebrate when they have more women and more people of color. Even if they don't call it DEI, even if they don't do it publicly, they're not going to change their opinion, the opinion that they were trumpeting and celebrating 1 year ago in 2024. It's not like suddenly they go, oh, gee, we were wrong. Let's give jobs to the white men. No. We're just barely able to even talk about this now. We just lived through a decade of public propaganda on how it's a good thing to get rid of white men, straight white men. What do you think that means? That means we're helpless. We are actually helpless. Being a man doesn't change that. The system is still this way. And what are we going to do? Fight for Trump, the guy who Mark Levin just said today, this is our first Jewish president? And Trump goes, yes, that's true. Where do we go, Jeremy Carl and all the right-wing people? Are we going to join ICE and fight for this guy? What about when he gets out of power in 4 years and all the ICE agents get prosecuted by the new left-wing power? We are in a tenuous position where we are just barely able to even talk about this right now. And you say, well, don't be so helpless. Be a man. And do what? It's like saying just be more of a genius, like the article himself, Jacob Savage, mentions, like if I was good enough, right? Well, yeah, of course, if you are extremely talented, you can succeed in basically anything you do. But I thought here on the right wing, we understood hierarchy. We understood that there are kings, but there are also chuds. And you know what? Even midwits. Do you want them all to just become plumbers? Do you want them all to become ICE agents? What about the white men who were designed by God to be artists, to be lawyers, to be university professors, to make movies, to write the news? What about those guys? Are we just going to give up on all of them? Or are we going to say just pull yourself up by your bootstraps like another boomer, be a man, and I don't know, create your own newspaper, create your own news media, create your own movies? Well, we are doing that. Thank God for modern technology and Elon Musk buying Twitter and allowing us to continue to do it, but it's very tenuous. In England, you'd get arrested for doing it, for doing your own thing and putting your own thoughts out there on the internet. You'd get arrested before you built any kind of platform or career or cultural prestige, influence in the culture. So what do you mean to tell all these white males who have learned helplessness, just don't be helpless? They are helpless. The system has not changed. The system is still bad. Look at Brown University as an example. I won't even touch the travesty that is going on there. But Brown University has offered $0 as a reward to catch the shooter, who, by the way, just targeted the vice president of the college Republicans on this left-wing campus. They don't care about her. And they do care about their president, who just got a nice $3 million a year salary. This is what she looks like, by the way. She's still getting $3 million a year, right? This system has not changed. In fact, they're not even targeting just white men anymore. This is who they shot at Brown University. And we watch as the Brown University and Providence police fumble and do nothing to protect her, even though it seems pretty obvious that this was a targeted political attack against a conservative. We don't care. We bury the story. The news doesn't talk about it because the news is still controlled by those women and people of color who got hired by the white men who went along with the DEI. This system has not changed. What are you offering to the white men who can't get a job or can't get a promotion, who have to bite their tongue, who have to act all effeminate in real life or else they're going to get pulled into HR, right? What are we offering them? You can't just tell them to man up and stand up for yourself. They're going to get fired. They're going to lose their job. That system has not gone away. And to pretend like that isn't the case is not helpful. In fact, it's just further demoralizing, right? So even though, the Jewish guy, Jacob Savage, is wrong about not blaming them, we should blame them. I totally understand his demoralization and the humiliation of realizing that you were not good enough to slip by. I don't think as a Christian we should go into that resentment of looking up, oh, he just got it because he was connected, or, she just got it because she's a woman of color. Like, we don't get into the resentment of it, but the reality of it is still there. Jeremy Carl and whoever else is criticizing this, the reality is still there. So until you have a plan, until you have an army to join or a new country or whatever, until you're going to hire white guys, then don't just say, okay, man up. You sound like a boomer. These realities are still here. Even Nick Fuentes is kind of falling into this as he tells his groypers, well, what you got to do is just infiltrate the system, go become part of the powerful universities, blah, blah, blah. They won't get a job. Did you not read the article? That is the reality. I'm living that reality. My friends are living that reality. It has not changed. Of course, everybody's kind of gone underground. We can't call it DEI anymore, but it's not changed, right? We still have an Indian running the FBI. We still have women all throughout Trump's administration. We don't have any sort of real pro-white male opportunities in this country beyond some very small corners of the right and of right-wing Christianity. We don't have that stuff yet. We need to build it. So help us build it, yes. But don't in the meantime go, well, don't feel bad. Of course we feel bad. Of course we feel bad. We've gone through decades of demoralization. We watched Charlie Kirk get shot and nobody do anything. Even though we just saw the left burn the country down over a black guy overdosing on fentanyl. And then Brown University, we see Ella Cook here get shot. And they bury the story. And we have to have Twitter sleuths try and figure out what's going on because nobody will tell us even that this girl just got assassinated. It's so demoralizing. And the answer to demoralization is not to lie or to pep rally and just say, rah, rah, be a man. The answer is to say, yes, this is happening, and here's what we're going to do about it. Here's the plan moving forward. If we get more talk like that, then people will perk up. People will love it. We love Trump. Why? Because he had a plan. He wins. He got an administration. And even though he hasn't done everything, even though we are, not as far along as we'd like to be, we still have way, way, way more wins this Christmas than we did last Christmas before Trump got into power. And that's encouraging. That's real. That's real stuff going on. So let's do that. Let's focus on what we can do and give opportunities to our guys rather than, further demoralize them by saying, well, you just got to try harder. The whole point is trying isn't working. We ran into that naively face first about 10 years ago or earlier for some people. We ran into that wall. We ran into that reality. And we're still running into that reality. And it's still true to this day that most of the conservative GOP and Trump's administration even are not even willing to admit that that's true, right? We still want to do deals with IBM to let in a bunch of Indians. We still want to let Microsoft send a couple $1 billion worth of jobs over to India and pretend like that doesn't matter. Pretend like that doesn't take jobs away from Americans. We have Vivek today writing in the New York Times about, civic nationalism, propositional nationalism, where anybody can be an American. It's still happening today over and over again. So of course we're demoralized. Of course we are. It's still happening on the right. And until we have some kind of movement, something to do, it's going to continue to be hard, right? It's going to be hard. And I understand that. Don't hate on a white man for feeling that way. It sucks. It sucks. And it's just beginning to turn around. So give us a break a little bit if we feel like, personally responsible for that. Because in some ways we are. In some ways we are. If we were just good enough, right? If we were that top 0.01 percentile, we probably could have made it. But not everybody is made that way. God decided that not everybody is going to be a genius. And that's good. It's good. So that's why we need leaders and systems and institutions to work within. We can't just tell each man pull himself up by his bootstraps. Be strong enough. No, man was not made to be an island all on his own. We need each other. And we will rebuild that brotherhood based on God's law and God's word of what is right. God wills it. In Jesus' name, amen.